Hi, everybody, and welcome to Under the Hood. And I have a guest, a very special guest. His name is Jarred Lischio, right? Is that how we pronounce it, Jarred?
Yeah, depending on what part of Jersey you're from, but yeah, you're right on there.
Or where you are on the turnpike in Jersey, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you consider yourself Turnpike or Parkway people, yeah, exactly right.
And this is Jarred with a double R, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Jarred, right? As I went back and looked for you, and I think you have Jarred with one R, and then I see it just so people can find you.
Yeah, the double. My mom knew she'd be throwing everybody off when she gave me the second R, just for giggles there.
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Jared. He's a manager with the CFO Advisory team at WIS and Company, and he specializes in providing clients with financial planning and analysis services. His team helps small and mid-sized companies bridge the gap between their operational data and financial performance to identify those key areas that are driving their success and growth. So and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more. It goes on to say how much what drew him to corporate work, but we're gonna start in a little different place, Jared, and then we'll weave into your story.
Sure, of course.
So Under the Hood is all about patterns that are created in childhood impact us as grown-ups. And so I love this interface between who you are, how you developed, and then how you developed honestly as a leader and kind of moving forward from that direction based on patterns because behavior runs in patterns. And so to tell us a little bit about your family of origin, just kind of broke, how you grew up and the things that you think would be really helpful for us to know about you.
Sure, definitely a really interesting way, but in kind of 30 or so seconds or less. So my parents grew up in a really, it's funny, they kind of grew up down the street from each other, but didn't really come together later. But they grew up in Little Falls, New Jersey, both of which really the more blue collar type parents.
Hmm.
My grandfather worked on the Parkway his whole life, so was actually one of the first people. He remembers the days when they're paving the last couple miles of it.
Wow.
And on my dad's side, they actually worked in the soda. They had a soda business, and they kind of worked there for a while.
Hmm.
But then what's interesting is kind of after high school, my parents went in completely different directions. My dad joined the Navy because really college, both financially and as well as just his interest, wasn't really in the cards. So he joined the
Hmm.
Navy, served his time, and then came back and became a salesman where he sold everything from dictionaries to industrial cleaning equipment or supplies to he sold cars for a very long time and eventually started selling insurance where he had sort of an insurance sales I guess team and company, and eventually he sold that off later. Whereas my mother went the completely, totally different direction where she went to college. She went to Montclair State University. Eventually went then back for her master's to Columbia. So she was a very studious person and had a corporate career in HR. Worked for a while. Eventually, she had my oldest brother, and became really full-time mother at that point. And that's really where eventually, like I said, my dad went on to have the business. He sold it, and that's kind of their two paths, which
You,
the end is so. They made such a great team, despite the fact that they had very opposite paths, so to speak.
right. And so how did those paths and where you came in terms of their evolution, how did that impact you? What were some of the kind of the values, the core things that you learned from your parents?
Definitely in terms of like on me, work ethic was always something. So my dad always tells the story. There's a point in time when I think they were he was selling cars, and they were really wanted to save for a down payment for a house. That was what they wanted to do at the time. They were really kind of struggling to make ends meet at that point. So my dad worked I think he would say, the full shift at the car dealership, and then he would work
Mm,
overnight, almost like overnight bookkeeping type at a hotel on Route 23 in Wayne, and
mm,
pretty much do that overnight, come home, sleep for a couple hours, and then kind of rinse and repeat. So this is the type of growing up. I played sports my whole life, so I have my
right.
parents who come from this very much like if you have a goal, whatever it take,
Hmm.
work towards it. And
Hmm.
that was always, I think, the mindset that they came in with and really kind of pushed onto me. And kind of that's the perspective that I've always seen things through as well.
Right. So how did, again, I love sports and sports psychology, and my father used to say he was a great athlete. You can learn anything you need to learn in life, you can learn on the ball field. Uh,
I would agree.
so again, so some of those, be a little bit more specific with it, some of the things that really kind of stick with you all the time. So you've got that work ethic, and what else?
Interestingly enough, so we never. I always use like my father again. Like he sold his business. He was lived comfortably after that. God bless him. And but you would never know it if you met him or even saw him. He was one of those people that dressed in a t-shirt and shorts and was always in the backyard. And I was always helping him. He was always in the backyard, kind of doing his own pool work, doing his own lawn work. So it's one of those cases of we never had that mindset that things were handed down to us. We always had the
Hmm.
mindset of you had to work for, you had to make it happen, because you just never really know. And I think that's just another piece that me and my siblings have always taken with us of just we never really took anything for granted.
Right. Right. So let me ask you another question on the flip side. What were some of the patterns, maybe that your personal patterns that you kind of took on that didn't work so well for you, that you had to kind of learn, and maybe some walls that you walked into, and you know, the school of hard knocks kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tina. I hadn't thought about that, right? Which I should, or they should come easy because I definitely agree. You learn the most in life from your mistakes as much as you
Mhm.
from your successes, right? I could think of really my career, anyways, like the value of trusting your gut too. And I can
Mhm.
remember my first job out of college. I interviewed at a place, and I'll never forget it. It was the first. I graduated in 2020, and I interviewed at this place. It was a derivatives shop over in New York City. It was a great job for a finance role. And the interview took like 3 hours because it was the day that the
Mhm.
market crashed with COVID. So it wasn't so much
Wow.
that the interview itself took 3 hours. It's just the phones are ringing off the hook, and nobody really had time to interview the kid out of college.
Wow.
But I remember I had the interview and it went okay. And I remember looking around in this office and walking out and thinking like I just had a weird feeling. But the offer came, and I was being straight out of college. I was just so excited to have an offer to be, that's like the one thing, like where your graduation's coming up, you just want to check it, get it out of the way, know that like you're
Right.
good for the next step. And sure enough, the role just wound up not really being a great fit. The company and wasn't really the company, the culture, the people just weren't really a great fit in a number of different ways. And that's something that I've taken with me of any time, not that I plan, any time since then when I've looked for a role, trying my best to really trust my
Hmm.
gut feel. And sometimes it's
Hmm.
really in the physical space too of you can just get a sense really in the office if that's there. That's one thing that's a mistake that had I known, I could go back in time, say like that gut
Sure.
feeling, because that's a year and a half, 2 years of things that could have been done differently had you known. But of course, these are things that's just how you learn lessons
Sure.
sometimes.
So how is this kind of gut fit? Because I'm a mind body person, and I love the fact that you actually even brought it up. How does that work for you in your current work? How do you pay attention to it? What kinds of things guide you, actually? What are the kinds of things that you think about when you're trying to make some big decisions?
I mean, again, a really good question. And like you mentioned, there is this whatever it's intuitive, whether you call it butterflies, of like this sense, but it doesn't apply even such large decisions of where career or this and that. But I think it also sometimes applies to people, where
Mm.
sometimes you meet somebody in whatever the context may be, professionally or even otherwise, and it's a very fine, normal interaction, but you just kind of walk away and you're like, something about it like just doesn't
Mhm.
sit right with me.
Mhm.
And we've seen enough, and people. I'm sure everybody and your listeners can think of an experience of somebody who they brought close, and then they kind of regretted it later.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think it's sort of just trying to be like, I could see, I have this feeling that this could be one of those individuals that down the road I is a situation you'd like to avoid. So I think these are some of the things that I run into more so where I think of like that gut feeling coming back.
Right. And so has that something to do with hiring, something to do with your partners, something to do with whatever your partners, your partner in life, your friends, right? I always say that people actually tell you who they are very, very early on. Sometimes they'll say something the very first time that you meet them, and then we kind of don't pay attention to it, and it comes back and kind of hits you in the rear end sometimes, right?
Yeah, I'd say the most, I mean, definitely, I mean, there's plenty of people I meet, in my personal life. But I think like in the business context, I think of people that we always, like you mentioned, in our FP&A service is a very new offering for WIS. It's probably one of the, if not the newest offering. So we're always trying to meet new people, network, really get the word out. And
Hmm.
sometimes you meet people in that context that you sometimes get an interesting vibe from. And I always think back, there's one of the partners at WIS, is a gentleman named Matt Barbieri, gave a fantastic story of somebody he networked with, somebody who could have been a really good referral source for him. And
Hmm.
this is many years ago. He tells this story. He went out to lunch with this gentleman, and that person was very just disrespectful to the service staff, to the people that was working with him. It was a very uncomfortable experience for him, and he walked away saying this could be a good bit for business. That is, this could be a good referral source. The person had already mentioned of one potential
Hmm.
deal that could come from it, and he had this sort of this awakening moment. He's like, well, this person is going to be associated with me. I'll be associated with that person, and furthermore, the types of clients or potential clients and referrals that would come from a person like this would probably be a lot of people just like that.
Hmm.
And he sort of thought like these, like long term, like it may be tempting. You see this quick win right in front of you.
Sure,
Maybe even see
sure.
some potentials in the future, but you just feel like long term, this isn't the brand that you want to be associated with. Or on the other side, you don't want to be associated with that brand as well.
Right, right. So a lot of times you have to look at the long game, right? And
Exactly.
so I know, so a lot of the people who I invite onto the show are leaders, and you are one of them. You're one of the younger leaders that I have on my show, and I'm very interested in terms of where your aspirations go, and the pieces that you're working on, and the things that somebody in your position would want to kind of think about and pay attention to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, you let me know if, well, you can just steer me on course if I'm getting off course.
No,
But
no,
yeah,
no.
yeah, like I mentioned, the really exciting thing about the opportunity here at WIS is that it's a whole new service offering. They brought myself and one other person on to really get it off the ground. They brought me on about 2 years ago. We officially launched the service about a year and a half or so ago.
Hmm.
And the shift, and when you think about how myself to grow through it and grow with it, is before everything was very head. I always use the term like heads down. It was heads down in the spreadsheets, head down in your monitor, and that was kind of life. That was just the role that I did, and the role that, to an extent, I almost expected to be the next chapter. But when you get to this thing of you have this new service and you have to do the work, but also you have to grow it. Now you have to start picking your head up a little bit more. And
Hmm.
that's been, I guess I'll say an adjustment for lack of a better word. And that's just something I never really had to think about. And there's growing pains there of how do you sell yourself? How do you kind of summarize everything you do in 30 seconds or less in a way that's also
Hmm.
interesting and appealing? And that's a journey, again, would definitely say I'm still on. We're still learning. Not that I think it ever stops, but it's definitely an
Hmm.
area of like this is new territory for me, just
Right.
coming from where I was before.
Right. So and to your point, what I do know is that as we continue to grow, we need bigger skills. We need to
Exactly.
grow into the skills, right? I like to say that you know the, there is so much energy that we have to be able to hold when you're in a position of leadership, right? So you have to be able to hold
Totally.
yourself, and then you have to be able to manage other people, and so on and so on. So it's an ever, I think, a never ending, source of growth and transformation. And so let me ask you this. One of the things that I touch on a lot in my work is conflict, and how we manage it within ourselves, and then how do we manage it within our companies. Tell us a little bit about what goes on for you in that arena.
Yeah, definitely a really interesting question. I'd say it's very attuned to or attributed to the culture. Like so, WIS as a firm, we brag really heavily about the culture we have. It's very, especially in our advisory and consulting team, we are very dynamic. We're very attuned to what everybody has going on. We work very well together, and that's something that's like a point of pride. If I'm not radiating that myself, so I'd say the biggest source of I'll call it a conflict is really a lot around resource allocation of just our team is growing tremendously and sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
work outpaces the resources. So we have so many jobs going on at any given point in time, especially during our busy season, which is sort of the earlier part of the year. And sometimes there's just a number of jobs and somebody needs staff and seniors and people to put on them and they're finding that everybody's kind of booked. And we've, again, to our credit, it's really, there hasn't been this, I'll say heated back and forth, but there's been
Mm-hmm.
times where the managers and the people who are kind of running the jobs will sit down in a room and say, listen, I have X, Y, and Z. How can we make this all work? I need some resources. You have some people booked, but can we borrow from over here? And somebody else goes, listen, I have this person, but you can probably borrow him for an extra couple hours if you need. It becomes this very almost like give and take, but a very collaborative one. And so I think, like I said, it's attributed to that. It's something that could be potential for a lot of headbutting of just I need this person and I'm having it. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
giving them up, but it's very much this client first mentality of okay, we have a role to do, we have a project to complete. How can we make it work for everybody?
Right. So let me ask you another question because I do
Hmm.
know that culture, everything kind of filters down from the top, right? Tell us about your head honcho and how that filters down to you and all the rest of the employees.
Yeah, that's great. I'm actually glad you brought that up. That's something I was hoping to touch on at some point, actually from a point you made earlier, where so our managing partner is a gentleman named Paul Peterson, and
Hmm.
he's extremely charismatic, and that's the point I wanted to speak to before of when I think about being a leader, and I'm very much like I read a lot of books, and I've read books about leadership and charismatic leadership, and the one thing
Hmm.
that all of these books have said, even like how to win and influence people, is you can't fake. The easiest way to attract people to you is to really care about them, and
Hmm.
you have to show that, and you really can't fake it. You can't pretend to care
Yeah.
about somebody's birthday. You can't pretend to care about what somebody has going on outside of work. Like the only way to do it is to actually do it. And Paul
Hmm.
Peterson is a living example of that. And I've seen him, and he's done it to myself as well, where he can walk around the office, and any employee that he walks by, he knows what they have going on after work. He knows if they have kids, what are the kids' sports. He'll ask how they're doing. He attends events for people personally outside. So just actually about 2 weeks ago, we have a person in our firm who her son has VEDS, which is a disease.
Hmm.
And there was a walk fundraiser in town, and myself and my wife were lucky enough to be able to go. And Paul, I wasn't even surprised to see Paul there. And there's a number of other people from the firm there too. But it just speaks to he has made it. He's successfully pretty much connected to everybody in the firm, and I think
Hmm.
that leadership really comes down, and everybody tries to
Yes.
emulate it.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful story, honestly, because that's kind of my mission.
Mine
Is
too.
really right is really kind of supporting that for me and maybe for you it just makes common sense, but I didn't know that common sense was a gift. And common sense
You'd be
is
surprised, right?
intimately connected to emotional intelligence, and I know again in this day and age employees, people who work for a company, want somebody who is real, and it's not always easy as a leader to be as authentic as you might be because again you have a role which
Hmm.
you have to be very careful, and again is very lonely at the top because you frequently don't have that that level of camaraderie to share those kinds of things because you have to be that person who everybody can say he's got my back, right?
No,
So
exactly. It's
out of these qualities, which are the ones that you're working on?
whew, definitely a great question. Um, I guess I could say all of them because I think they all could always continue to be worked on, right? Um, but I think I guess to really pick one is really, I'll say coming out, for lack of a better term, coming out of my shell. And what I mean by that is naturally I'm a fighting introvert. And what I mean by that is I know I'm more introverted. I know my comfortable place is sort of seated at my desk. But I say fighting because it's something that I know that I just have to fight off the urge to stay there and get up and really, in a number of different ways, just again, just make it known to the people that work with me and for me that I would love to, or we have the connection and just making sure that it's there and really very pronounced, right? I don't think anybody would doubt so much that the connection's there, but emotionally, I mean, the only way to really have or feel it more pronounced is really to make it explicit.
Beautiful. Well, I have to say, Jarred, that you are a wonderful, wonderful poster child, an example of aspiring leadership and using the wisdom that you're hearing, from not only your parents, who set a beautiful example for you, but also from the people you are working for, and then being able to carry that down to the people who, as you said, who work for you. We do know that people don't leave companies; they leave managers. And if that relationship doesn't work, then there's a lot of dissension that people don't talk about, and then you lose really great talent. And so I'm just wanting to point this part of this, we call it the human capital side
No,
of
and
work and business. Yes.
yeah, and it's
Go ahead.
actually I was just going to add on to that, Tina. It's a really interesting point that specifically within our advisory practice. So we've been the last several years or so been experiencing a lot of growth, and with that, the partners in the firm and the partners in the practice actually have made an effort to say like, this group, this thing we have here is growing, and the expectation is the people here are going to grow with it. So you'll probably be in these leadership type roles quicker than maybe you would elsewhere. And they've had people come in, they've taken time to really say, we understand that's where you're going, and we want to prepare you now to be that leader and to have these skills ready to go, because like I said, it'll probably come sooner than we think.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So tell us again, Jarred, where people can get in touch with you and exactly kind of what you do so that they can reach out to you.
Sure. Thanks, Tina. Yeah. So WIS.com, that's the website for our firm. We are an accounting and consulting firm. So we do tax audit as well as advising and consulting on a number of different things, from technology to CFO advisory. Me specifically, I'm in our financial consulting or FP&A practice. So getting a better handle on really the nitty gritty details of your business, the data underneath it, as well as sort of understanding what direction your business is heading, and if there's any risks we have to account for and really any changes we have to work, we can partner with you to really position you in the best place for the future.
Beautiful. And we will have your contact information kind of when we put this out. So I want to thank you so much for your generosity of time and your
No, thank you, Tina.
authenticity. And
No, the pleasure's
I
all
wish
mine.
you the best of luck. Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thanks so
No, thank
much.
you so much for having me.